There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door. Open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
And open up the door starts right now, so fling wide, you heavenly gates. Prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind me. He said, I looked, and there was a door standing open. He heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with them, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day, discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Thanks for tuning in to a brand new edition of Open Up the Doors here at Faith FM. I am streaming live over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page over at facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. If you would like to join in over there and let me know where you are watching from, let me know where you are listening from. If you've never liked the Open Up the Doors page, please like the page over there. Open Up the Doors, again, facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. You could also follow me. I am on the Truth Social platform. Just look up AJ White over on Truth Social. If you happen to be over on that platform, the networking and the friendships there are growing. I'm really appreciating being over there on Truth Social as well. I'm going to truncate my normal preliminaries here that I normally do because I got a very special guest, and I want to really just get to it right away because there's so much to talk about. But on today's broadcast, I do have John Howler with me, and he's been on the broadcast many, many times before. And for those who still may not be familiar with them, John Howler is an elder and a Bible teacher at Fellowship Bible Chapel in Columbus, Ohio. He's a conference speaker, and he puts out a weekly prophecy update every Sunday from his church. He's even doing midweek updates now as well. But you can catch his prophecy updates. He's on YouTube. He's on Rumble. He's on Truth Social as well. But, yeah, we're going to just be having a conversation today about, everything that's going on in the Mideast with Israel, the rise in anti-Semitism, and all these things pertaining to really what is happening. And I'm so thrilled to have John join me today. John, are you there?
I am, Andy.
Praise God.
Good to be with you.
Thank you, sir, for making the time to be on the broadcast today. I know you're really busy. You're, so much going on, but I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Glad to do it.
It's interesting too because I didn't purposely plan it this way, but today is the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht. On the night of November. Wow. Yeah, today, I don't know if you even thought of it, but.
No, I had not thought of it.
Yeah, well, I thought of it for two reasons. It also happens to be my wife's birthday. So I was reminding myself of the date. I said, wait a minute, something else very important here besides my wife's birthday happened on this date, November 9th, 1938. Yes, so, and it's I just felt like, wow, Lord, that's a opportune time to talk about these things that are happening in this present day, because in a lot of ways, I've even seen headlines that are saying, are we on a present day? Are we on the verge of a present day Kristallnacht? So anyway, go ahead.
I think probably, Andy, we could say that we're in the midst of one.
Yes, sir.
So we saw a manifestation of one, and this is, I'm sure, something we'll talk more about. But the rise of anti-Semitism. Somebody asked me the other day whether I thought it was like 1930s Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing in Germany was limited to Germany and some surrounding countries like Belarus and to some extent Ukraine and some of the Baltic states. But this is worldwide. This one's very different. I think it's beyond 1930 Germany, the development of what we see happening.
And yeah, certainly what it could snowball into, which we will talk about in a minute. And I'm titling this broadcast today right up at the top of the broadcast so people know, because this is really what the I think what we need to understand. I'm titling this broadcast "Situational Awareness," because people need to understand really what these things are. It's just not another news event. It's just not another thing happening. And I came across this comment, which really, in so many ways, is a germ seed for so much that we could talk about today. But in a New York Times interview, and Hamas spokesperson, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the guy's name, but he said this just the other day or maybe a week ago. I'm not sure when this interview was, but he said this: "I hope that the state of war with Israel will become permanent on all the borders and that the Arab world will stand with us." He said, "Our goal is not to run Gaza like a government's supposed to. Our goal is not to run Gaza and to bring it water and electricity and such. But what he said, he goes on to say, Hamas, the Qassam, and the resistance woke the world up from its deep sleep and showed that this issue, the Palestinian issue, must remain on the table." He said that this battle was not because we wanted fuel or laborers. It did not seek to improve the situation in Gaza. This battle is to completely overthrow the situation. There you have it. These people that are trying to say, two-state solution, these people that are trying to say, humanitarian pauses and peace negotiations, these people do not want that. That's not what they're looking for. They're admitting it.
Yeah, they certainly are. Look, that story is very current. What that interview with the Hamas leader said, that's front page above the fold on the front page of today's New York Times.
Oh, okay, so it's today. I just saw it, but I wasn't sure when the interview was. Yeah,
it was published on the website yesterday afternoon. But
okay,
I'm looking at I know some people don't like that I do this, but I actually subscribe to the New York Times because I always like to know what the enemy is thinking. And it's a good sort of a one-stop shop for a lot of different left-wing propaganda. So it's kind of an easy way to get access to a lot of it. Yeah, but that's on the front page of this morning's New York Times, that they want a permanent state of war with Israel.
Mm-hmm. So
and,
go ahead.
I think that's their goal. I mean, it's clear. And that sort of leads to the follow-on question, and I think this is a question that a lot of people are asking. I know that in the Republican primary, with some of the candidates that are vying for that nomination for president, Vivek Ramaswamy, he's actually a local guy, lives here close to where I do, in a much different neighborhood, but be that as it may. He has said, what's the end game here? That's the question that a lot of people are asking. I have done some work with a group called the Israeli Defense and Security Forum that was founded by a retired brigadier general in the IDF named Amir Avivi. And General Avivi, and I've talked about this many times, but he's recently, the IDSF, by the way, does daily briefings that you can sign up for at their website. And I think it's idsf.org.il. But he did an article recently, the day after Hamas. And what does this look like? And so Ramaswamy's asking the questions in the Republican debates. And the question is, what's the end game? So we know the end game now for Hamas. Hamas is, they don't care whether they lose. This is just the first stage in a permanent war against Israel and the Jews. That's how they view this. That's how they've always viewed this. And I think what happened was that, and we can talk about what happened leading up to October 7th. I think what happened was a lot of people got complacent, that they thought that they could deal with Hamas, that they could deal with the radical Palestinians and achieve some type of a peace. Netanyahu came out the other day, and this has been somewhat controversial, and of course the anti-Semitics and the Jew haters jump all over this, where Netanyahu is sort of pragmatic on this particular issue. And he says, we're going to have to occupy and govern and control Gaza when this is over for an indefinite period of time. Well, now that's led to a lot of hand-wringing in many places, including the pro-Palestinian State Department that we have here in the United States. I should say the pro-Palestinian, pro-Iranian State Department that we have in our current administration, which I refer to as the Obama administration. I'm sorry, the Biden administration, because I think there's a certain person who used to be in charge who's still sort of pulling a lot of strings in the background. And he sort of pulled that veil off last weekend when he issued some statements. But the pro-Palestinian State Department, they don't like what Netanyahu said. This morning I can't remember where I read it, Ehud Olmert, who was the prime minister of Israel from, I think, 2006 to 2009, he subsequently, after he left office, he resigned because he was indicted on bribery charges. He was subsequently convicted, and I think he spent a little bit of time in prison, but he's still hanging around. And he said, Netanyahu's having a nervous breakdown. Netanyahu needs to go. And what we need to convene, and this is kind of interesting when we look at it from a Bible prophecy standpoint. We need to convene an immediate international consortium of countries and leaders to negotiate a two-state solution, to give the Palestinians a state. So despite the fact that the government of Hamas in Gaza, which was elected by 80% of the people when they had elections back in, I think, about 2005, 2003, 80% of the people in Gaza voted for Hamas against the Palestinian Authority faction called Fatah. And they, by the way, subsequent to that, they had a bit of a civil war in which 8,000 Gazans were killed. This wasn't a war of Israel against Gaza or anything. This was, I don't like the term Palestinian, but I will call them Palestinian.
I know, I get it.
It refers to them as.
The common verbiage.
Palestinian against Palestinian, and 8,000 died. And I'm going to ask the question, how many protests did you see about from left-wing activists on college campuses back in the 2000s protesting the death of 8,000, quote, as they always say, innocent Palestinians in an internecine civil war that took place? And the answer is there weren't any. This
exactly.
is all about,
they're not interested in
all
that.
About being against Israel and the Jews, these protests.
Exactly. Referring back to what you said about Netanyahu's comments about occupying and governing, I said that 2 days after, I said the attack was October 7th. I think they declared war on the 8th, or even maybe on the 7th, but on the 8th or 9th they declared war. I told my wife immediately, that's what Israel has to do. That's just common sense. They need to go in there. The entire Gaza Strip is run by Hamas, completely, totally, utterly, the government. They need to eradicate as much of the government they can, and they have to occupy it. And the irony is that Gaza has not been, quote unquote, occupied in the last, whatever it's been, 15, 20 years or whatever it's been. But they keep calling it the occupied territory. Well, it wasn't occupied, but now it will be. And that's just normal warfare, tactics.
Right. And the interesting thing, too, in this, the one factor that people just don't consider is that the Gaza border fence is about 60 kilometers long, but only about 38 kilometers of that distance is in Israel. 22 kilometers is the border between Gaza and Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think the border wall between Gaza and Israel is, pretty designed to prevent anybody from coming in, it's even stronger between Israel and Gaza.
Yes.
Egypt and
Right,
Gaza.
right,
And the question would be, why is that? And the reason is that the Egyptians know that Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood offshoot. The Muslim Brotherhood was started in Egypt in 1928. And so they've had different offshoots that have come out of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's largely funded, by the way, today by, I'll say the name, Qatar, the country in the Persian Gulf that has about, I think, 400,000 people. They each get about $2 million a year from their vast oil and gas revenue that they bring in each year. They share the largest natural gas field in the world with Iran. And even though they don't, one Sunni and one Shia, economics seem to dictate that they can get along on that basis. But the Muslim Brotherhood, if you remember, in the early days of the Arab Spring in 2011, 2012, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, Morsi, they took power in Egypt for a period of time until al-Sisi came in and drove them out. So they know the risk that comes with the Muslim Brotherhood. And people will say, well, they have that vast area of the Sinai. Why don't they build settlements in the Sinai for the Palestinians? Because Egypt is an Arab country. They could do the same in Jordan and send the people there, but they don't want them.
That's right.
Because they know that they're
They start civil wars wherever they go.
Within them.
They're terrorists. They start civil wars wherever they go. But
I
go ahead.
I also think, Andy, that we need to kind of go back historically, and if you remember the first foreign policy trip, that's always kind of significant. So Trump's first foreign policy trip, he went to Saudi Arabia and Israel. Obama went to Turkey and Cairo. And in Cairo, June 4th, 2009, I think people should go back and listen to this speech in retrospect, because I think this speech was really the tip-off of what Obama, I guess, endorsed or started in motion, which led to the Arab Spring, starting in Tunisia in late 2010, but really getting underway in March of 2011 in Syria with the Syrian civil war. And he gave that speech, and he went to Cairo. He went to Al-Azhar University, which is the leading Sunni theological institution on planet Earth. And he insisted that 2 or 3 rows in his speech be reserved for representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Egyptians were not very happy about this. So go listen to Obama's speech, because I think it indicated where he's coming from. And I've seen nothing that he's changed in the 15 and a half years since, well,
of course not.
14 and a half years since he gave that speech. It's actually only gotten worse. And he has his operatives playing it throughout our State Department, which are, as I said, pro-Palestinian, pro-Iranian, and anti-Israel. And they guise it, well, we want peace. We just want peace. We want peace and security. And we'll get the 2-state solution, which is a complete fabrication.
Yeah.
It's not 2-state. It's actually a third or fourth Palestinian state.
And looking where we are now, especially in the aftermath of October 7th, and we're seeing the rise in anti-Semitism all over the world, but what's even more alarming to a lot of Americans is the rise here. I looked up a couple of stats that I want to throw at you, and then I have a clip I want to play. But according to the FBI stats, in 2022, there was a 7% increase. I'm sorry, 2023, this year. This year, there had been a 7% increase in hate crimes overall in 2023, up from 2022. Just 7%. All hate crimes are terrible. But since the attacks on Israel on October 7th, anti-Semitism has gone up 400%. And those are FBI stats. And in the light of all of that, we have an administration that wants to put a task force together. I'm going to play you this clip, and I want to get your comments on it. But anti-Semitic attacks are 400%. And yet Biden and Harris have decided that we don't need a task force to fight anti-Semitism. We need a task force to fight Islamophobia. Now, I'm going to play this clip from Kamala Harris from the other day, and I want to get your comments on the other side of it. Give it a listen. You've probably heard this, but for our audience, I want them to hear this.
And today, we take another important step forward in our fight against hate. For years, Muslims in America and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. As a result of the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have seen an uptick in anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic incidents across America, including the brutal attack of a Palestinian-American woman who was Muslim and the killing of her 6-year-old son. A senseless act of violence that the Department of Justice is investigating as a hate crime. For so many people in our nation, the past few days and weeks have brought about all too familiar fears. Fears that they will be targeted, profiled, or attacked simply because of who they are, how they worship, or how they look. And so today, I am proud to announce the Biden-Harris administration will develop our nation's first national strategy to counter Islamophobia. This strategy will be a comprehensive and detailed plan to protect Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim from hate, bigotry, and violence, and to address the concern that some government policies may discriminate against Muslims. For example, the so-called Muslim ban, which President Biden revoked on our first day in office.
So there you have it. It was a little clip of a longer speech she gave, but I think that sums up some of the misdirection and deflection that this administration is trying to achieve by way of propaganda, if you ask me. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's very indicative of a leadership in our country who is completely out of touch with the real world. That was, and I don't know if they when they have a policy that they want to put forth that's particularly moronic, I guess they trot out Kamala Harris to do the dirty work, so Joe Biden doesn't get tainted with it. They recently sent her to say some things about AI and I don't even know if she knows what it is. They sent her to London to the AI safety conference last week when there were some discussions about that. And I actually think that some of that plays into this whole thing in Israel. Maybe we can talk about that too. But listen, so my question is, how many anti-Islam or Islamophobic attacks have taken place in the United States since October 7th? I mean, I'm not aware of any, and I watch the news pretty closely.
Besides the one that she mentioned?
How many anti-Semitic attacks have taken place?
Well,
and the numbers they're unbelievable. There was a man hit in the head with a
megaphone.
I forget what it was. I don't know if it was a camera or something.
It was a bullhorn.
In Thousand Oaks, California.
Yeah, a bullhorn.
And he died.
Yeah.
He was Jewish. and of course, immediately Time Magazine and others posted, "Oh man, Jewish man dies in confrontation." Like there was some moral equivalency to what was going on. I saw a video this morning after we were sort of texting back and forth what to talk about, of a Jewish man, and I don't know if it was Brooklyn or Manhattan, but he was hit in the head with a chair, and it split his head open. The police then had to usher him into a business and barricade the door as this man and the police trying to protect him were chased down the street by pro-Palestinian supporters, Hamas supporters. And so where's the task force on anti-Semitism?
Exactly.
And I guess they say, well, you already have the ADL and other things like that, so we don't really need to worry about it. It's just, it's totally, well, it's not moronic, it's evil what's going on. So the people who perpetrate the evil get a protective task force. The people who are the subject of the evil don't get anything. It's pretty shocking.
And when the White House is confronted with it, what's her name?
Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, thank you. Karine Jean-Pierre. When she's confronted with it, her answer is, her response is, we have not seen any credible threats against Jews. But Muslims have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. 180 degrees backwards. That was a quote. We have not seen any credible threats, but Muslims have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks.
Painting Stars of David on Jewish homes and businesses all over the world is not evidence of a credible threat. I mean, this is a repeat of what happened in 1930s Germany and in parts of Europe. And so she does it. It's actually unbelievable. I sometimes think, Andy, that the people that I'm opposed to, that they live in a completely alternate, not a parallel universe, because a parallel universe would assume that there's something right and just about what they believe.
Yeah.
It's an alternative universe that they live in.
Amen and amen, amen. John, I got to take a radio break.
Sure.
Hang on, and we'll be back really, literally in less than 2 minutes. Just got to do some radio spots here. We'll be right back, folks. Keep it right here on Faith FM. The Fusion, Heart, Mind, and Soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7, 93.3 in that peak, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. Let me give you a little bit of a heads up. The first hour of this broadcast re-airs today at 3 p.m. on Thursday, and it also re-airs on Saturdays at 1 p.m. If you missed any part of the broadcast, you could keep it right here on Faith FM, and you'll catch the first hour. However, this is going to be a 2-hour broadcast today, and we are going to be uploading it once we edit it and put it through post-production. It will be on both my YouTube platform and my Rumble platform. You can look me up on either one. Just look up Andy White, Open Up the Doors, either on YouTube and Rumble. If you're on YouTube, hit the little bell. You'll be notified when these archived broadcasts are uploaded there. And if you've never subscribed either to YouTube or Rumble, please do so. I kind of consider Rumble my main platform because they don't ban me, they don't block me. In fact, the last time I had John Haller on, I couldn't even put up that interview until like a week later because I was under a ban for whatever it was back then, 10 days or 5 days, whatever it was. So, it's just YouTube can be such a pain in the neck. So I'm getting more success with Rumble, but you could subscribe to either or both and find my things up there. I'm also, one more thing, and then we'll get back to our discussion here. I also have a group page, an Open Up the Doors group page on Truth Social that is slowly but surely growing. And if you're on this Truth Social platform, I would love for you to join the group page. It's really an extension of this radio broadcast. The things we talk about here, the videos get uploaded there as well as, it's just an extension of what I do here, talking about the current events from a biblical perspective and worldview and the things that we do here on Open Up the Doors. All right. With no further ado, I'll get back to our conversation with Brother John Haller. John, are you still with me?
I am.
Praise God. So, go ahead. Go ahead.
We could just quickly go back.
Go right ahead.
What our esteemed press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said.
Absolutely.
At the White House, that there's no evidence of attacks. I mean, I'm looking here. Gal Gadot, who was the star of the Wonder Woman movie a few years ago, she had a screening in Los Angeles. She's Jewish. And she had a screening in Los Angeles yesterday for a movie about a 45-minute edited down series of clips that the Israeli government had prepared about what had happened in Gaza and the atrocities that were committed. And they had a massive brawl outside the screening in Los Angeles yesterday. I'm looking at another thing. I mean, it's just off the Drudge Report. New York City hate crimes against Jews surge. I mean, what planet is Karine Jean-Pierre living on when we see these things happening? I mean, it's gaslighting on an epic scale.
Well, that's what it is.
You're seeing it, and they're running around saying, "Well, you're not really seeing what you're seeing. That's not true." I mean, this is
they're not blind.
epic gaslighting.
They're not blind. They're just lying. That's exactly gaslighting is the term. You know.
Right, it's propaganda.
And that's a perfect thing to say, propaganda, because I was just going to bring somebody.
By the way, you need to be careful what you look at out there. There's a tremendous amount of propaganda going. So, for example, there's people who might have been people we considered allies in response to the Charlie Vector 019er situation that we had starting in early 2020. People that question the government controls and lockdowns and things that whether those were necessary, valid, or what, we're going to have major problems. They're coming out. Many of them are coming out with just rapidly anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, that Israel's doing this on purpose. And there's even people posting, for example, I was looking at a Twitter account of a guy named Max Blumenthal, who I think fits the very definition of a self-loathing Jew. And he was posting another video by a Palestinian guy saying that, Hamas didn't do anything. This was all done by Israel and the IDF and police against their own people to allow them to go into Gaza and not have and commit genocide in Gaza, do ethnic cleansing. And because of the atrocities that occurred, that Israel would be able to do that without world condemnation. Well, that didn't last more than a couple of days. And so the world has risen up very strongly against what Israel is doing there. And I guess the question that I have for everybody that's attacking Israel for this, it's war. Mm-hmm. And I heard a quote from a guy named Walter Russell Mead. He's a famous historian, Middle East historian, and he was being interviewed on a podcast, Barry Weiss's podcast the other day, and he said, war is not a war crime. We have to keep that in mind. There are war crimes, but what do you do when they're embedding themselves under hospitals, when they're the terrorists? And, there's 40,000 strong estimated in Gaza. They build their tunnels and headquarters under a hospital. They build them under schools. They build them under mosques. They use mosques. They use ambulances to transport themselves back and forth throughout the Gaza Strip to transfer weapons. I mean, what's the alternative? What do you propose that Israel do? And so you get a liberal, left-wing, I don't know if I should say, a liberal left-wing blowhard like Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister of Israel, saying, well, we just need to get an international consortium together and start a two-state solution. On what basis is that even valid? You're criticizing Netanyahu for letting the Gaza thing get out of control or trying to work with it, and now you want to do it that. So that seems to be the very definition of insanity, doing something again and again and hoping for a different result. And it's just, I don't know what the solution is. Long-term, Israel has to take complete control of Gaza when this thing is over, and the U.S. needs to butt out. Because we don't have a valid alternative point to even consider, because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, they got to do what they got to do. But to echo a little bit of what you're saying, what's really frustrating to me, and I'm sure to you, is the people who are quote unquote on our side of the aisle, so to speak, the Christian community, the things you see there. I've said this many, many times. Christians can be so gullible, it drives me crazy. They don't know how, they talk about discernment, but I wonder how much discernment they use. They buy into all kinds of propaganda, whether it was between the Russian propaganda that Putin was putting out, through his Russian troll factory, which is a real thing during the Ukrainian war, or now with this, the stuff you see. And like you said, somebody, I just got into a conversation yesterday with somebody who was saying, yeah, and I heard, Netanyahu really knew about this and let it happen. And I just shot that down. Like, that's insane. That's absurd. Benjamin Netanyahu is a patriot. He loves his nation. He loves his people. And to even think that, just no matter what you might think of him as a politician, that's just absurd to believe that. And you really need to guard your heart and use some spiritual discernment, if not even some common sense, before you start spouting things. It's been said, there's an old saying that says, he who wins the propaganda war wins the war. And we need to keep with broadcasts like you do, broadcasts that I do, and there are others. We just need to keep speaking the truth and shooting these things down. There are things that we can't control, that are out of our control, but I certainly believe that God has given us platforms to push back on these lies and on this gaslighting with the truth. Something is put out by, and it sounds so official, the Gaza Health Ministry, and people say this is the Gaza Health Ministry, but the Gaza Health Ministry is literally Hamas staffed and controlled wing of the Hamas terrorist government. And
that's right.
And these newspapers admit it. The Washington Post admitted it, that in its coverage, that the Hamas ministry documents reporting the number of deaths in Gaza did not differentiate between combatants and civilians. So they admit that these numbers are being fabricated, but they report them as fact anyway.
Well, and they don't distinguish. So, like, I heard someone this morning, I don't know where I was. I guess I violated one of my personal rules, was I actually watched a clip from The View and of Hillary Clinton. So that was a double whammy. I get what I deserve. But one of the people on there, in response to Hillary, she said, well, they've killed 10,000 innocent people. So I'm not going to dispute the 10,000 dead number in Gaza. I think that's probably close to accurate. But again, you're exactly right what you just said. They don't distinguish between the terrorists that have been killed and the children. So what? We know children are innocent. But remember that when this attack occurred, it was 2,000 to 2,500 Hamas terrorist fighters that came across, along with probably at least 2,000 Gazan civilians that came in and did this. So please spare me that everybody there is innocent and didn't participate in this. And in fact, there's pretty good evidence now that I don't know the exact numbers, 18 to 22,000 people that Israel was allowing to come into Israel from Gaza to work in different places down there in those kibbutzes and those communities and the agriculture that's down there in the south. Many of them were mapping where things were and giving that information to Hamas, which prepared detailed maps. And this was in my view, I think there's plenty of negligence on the Israeli side that the investigations will bring it out.
Yeah.
I personally do not think that Benjamin Netanyahu, his political career is over. I think I make that prediction. Even one of a newspaper that long supported him, Israel Hayom, came out today and said that he needs to resign immediately. So Golda Meir, when the surprise attack occurred at the Yom Kippur War in 1973, even though later investigations revealed that she didn't really do anything wrong, she was out of office within about 6 months. And I expect that to be the same result with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's served a long time, but I just, as a practical matter, I think his career is probably over because it happened on his watch.
Yeah, and that's so. And to that degree, that's true. It happened on his watch. Political leaders will always be responsible for that. I got someone commenting right now on my Facebook stream here, saying, "No, Netanyahu knew for sure. The IDF knows when a cat is near." But here's the thing, and I don't. Like you said, and there will be investigations. There will be. They're going to do that in the aftermath. But here's what I would say to that, and respectfully, you got to realize that Iran and Hamas have planned this. The reports are out. Hamas and Iran were planning this attack for a year, at least a year. It was well staged. It was well planned. It wasn't just an instantaneous outbreak. They did things that were technologically advanced. Was the IDF caught flat-footed? Very, very obviously they were. I don't believe anybody there really knew. I just don't. I can't ascribe to that. The intelligence services of Iran and Hamas, they found the weak spots. They found the blind spots. They found the Achilles heel, and then they exploited that Achilles heel. In my assessment.
And I think that, I appreciate that comment and I understand it. I think that comment is very much a sort of a shorthanded response to the situation. Give the Iranians, the Persians, and Hamas some credit for a masterfully planned operation. Now, look, there was an article that Dr. Mordecai Kadar, I don't know if he still is. He was a professor at Bar-Ilan University.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably one of the leading experts in the world, certainly in the Jewish world in Israel, one of the two leading experts on Islam and Arabic culture and how it's organized and structured. He's an incredibly intelligent man. I was on Alex Newman's podcast a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and the other guest on the half-hour show was Mordecai Kadar. So Dr. Kadar got most of the time. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, he could have taken the whole time because I just like listening to him because he's so intelligent. And he had written an article. He had shared some information in an article at JNS. That's a Jewish news syndicate, jns.org, back in, I think, April 13th of this year, in which he said, look, this is information that I'm getting from people that are involved in security service. And Dr. Kadar himself was involved in the IDF security service for probably 25 or 30 years as an intelligence analyst. And he said, listen, this is what I see coming. And one of them was the disruption in attack through the Gaza border fence. So the question I have for everybody is, okay, so the people knew that. They looked at it, they assessed it, and they dismissed it. And maybe they were negligent and wrong and everything to do that. But, the notion, for example, that I've seen that Netanyahu did this to solidify his political position is just not very well thought out because it's not working out that way. And Netanyahu, among whatever you want to say about him, he is a student of history. His father was probably the leading Israeli Jewish historian in the world during Netanyahu's life. So he died, I think, he died at the age of 102. And he taught here in the United States for many years at Penn and some other universities. But Netanyahu knows what happened to Golda Meir. So there's great risk in ignoring these warnings. But give the people who designed the operation some credit. Let me give you a couple of examples. Can I do that?
Sure, go ahead.
As to what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So they did, as Michael Duran, who's a security expert, and he has a Rumble channel, Israel at War. He's putting up little videos. Very well done in analysis. He works with a guy named Gadi Talb, who used to be on the left, now is on the right, and a good journalist and author and writer. And in their first podcast, one of the first podcasts they put up, they said, look, they used unsophisticated technology in sophisticated ways. They used drones that you can buy off the shelf. They do this. They went dark. They didn't communicate by email or cell phone or anything like that.
That's an important point.
And so the intelligence analysts, everybody's big on software and technology and observations and that sort of thing. And when they go dark, unless you have people embedded there, you're going to miss that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to embed people within Gaza. And they do that, but it's increasingly difficult for them to do that. The other thing that they did, and this kind of goes into artificial intelligence, AI data collection. I heard an interview with Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, And he said this, and I confirmed this in a number of other sources. I always try to double source things when I talk about them.
Absolutely.
And what he said was that they used data that they had gathered from cell phones. And a lot of this data is publicly available to people that want to buy it. You know, when you sign the terms of service on Facebook or TikTok or these apps and everything, they have the right to use and sell your data. That's part of the term. You know, that's what you agree to. You may not know that, but they were able to take that data, and while they may not have had specific data to tie it to, you know, XYZ soldier's phone, what they were able to do over time was they were able to analyze how people reacted to things. So, like, when they sent people to the fence, how was the IDF responding? Where were the people going? On Shabbat, and this was a Shabbat that this attack happened, what were they doing? How did they staff the base? I think there's 8 bases down there. But when you say base, I think in America we think of a base like 50,000 people. These are more bases of like 25 or 50 people, is based on my understanding. I could be wrong on that. I've been asking that question, haven't got it answered yet. And it may be that they just don't want to reveal that information. But they knew where they were. In fact, somebody sent me a video of someone who was taking a video, a soldier taking a video, but for all I know, the soldier who was taking this is not survived. There was an attack going on very early on, maybe even before people think the border fence was breached largely. And they may have come in through tunnels. They may have gotten a tunnel through under the fence, and they've been doing this for years. They're doing this in the Hezbollah is doing this in the north of Israel, up along the Lebanon border. They've been drilling tunnels through bedrock up there, for crying out loud. So it may have gotten in through tunnels. I don't know. The investigations will show this. But let's say they got through. They went to the base, and the reaction was, how do they know where everybody is? How do they know where we all are? And the answer is they were tracking them with cell phone data, and they knew that. And this ought to be, when you talk situational awareness, this ought to be a wake-up call for all of us here in our country, as we have literally millions of people unvetted pouring across our border, many of whom clearly will have ties to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to other terror organizations, and to the CCP. I mean, look at the pictures of the people coming across. It appears that about 80% of them are military-age males. This is an egregiously bad thing that our government's allowing. But back to the cell phone data, they took the cell phone. They were able to use that cell phone data to determine, for example, in rocket attacks, like by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, how did the people react? Where did they go? Where did they go in their home? Where did they go in the kibbutz? They can break it down to that level. They were also able to determine which doors were unlocked, because they would look at the flow of people and the data, location data, through a door. And if they didn't pause, that's an unlocked door that we can get in. And they mapped all of this out. And they planned this thing probably more likely for 2 or 2.5 years. And Hamas really didn't do anything during those 2.5 years. And everybody was following, they just want to have people come here and work and get the tax revenue. And they really want to have peace with us. And I want you to remember, in 2005, under pressure from our government, Ariel Sharon, the then prime minister, forced every Jew out of Gaza. They had communities down there. They were agricultural, flowers, greenhouses, that type of thing. They forcibly evacuated them. Now, I've heard the numbers 10 to 50,000. And in fact, I know people who lived there that were forced out of their home. And I've been in their home in Efrat. And this is a terrible thing that was done. The Palestinians came in, and here are these high-tech, the best greenhouse designs, drip irrigation and everything on the planet. And this would be, okay, the Palestinians, here you go. You can have this. What did they do? They destroyed them. And the Jews, when they left, they made sure that their departure from Gaza was so complete that they even dug up dead bodies of dead Jews to take with them, so that because a the body is very sacred to the Jewish people, the way they treat it. And they didn't want the Palestinians to dig up the bodies and desecrate them, which they do all the time. So they left Gaza in 2005. And now look what we have here 18 years later. We have a big mess. And so, look, there's plenty of blame to go around, okay, that people let this happen. And I know that there were security systems, but listen, they used drones to take out guard towers. They took drones and RPGs to take out communication centers. They had everything mapped out.
It was well planned.
So give the enemy some credit for doing a masterful job of planning the operation, and masterful in a very evil way.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And that's, again, these things need to be explained like we're doing so people are aware of these things and not just running with, on propaganda and emotion, which propaganda plays on emotion. I'm down to my last minute for this first hour, John. So just to wrap up this first hour, I know you're gonna hang out for the second hour as well, but just to put a nice little bow on this first hour, especially because it re-airs today, where can people find your material specifically?
Yeah, you can search my name, John Howler, on YouTube. That'll bring up other things that I've done other places, but the best place is Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel. And then on Rumble, we're there at Real FBC. That's all one word, Real FBC. So those are the best places to find me. But I do a lot of podcasts. I've done several I've done a lot this week. I think I did about 6 hours on Sunday. And they can find you on, obviously, my own and other people.
They can find you on Facebook at John Howler as well, obviously.
John Howler on Facebook, and then Rumble or Twitter, John Howler 54. I think this. I do see you're on Truth, although I don't see you much on there. Do you administrate that, or does somebody else? I don't post. I'm a one-man band, so I don't have time to post. But if John Howler 54 on Twitter, Getter, True Social, and Telegram. I do post a little bit on Telegram. That seems to be, although I don't like the way Telegram works that well, but I do post, again, if you see a picture of me in an orange shirt, bright orange shirt on Telegram, that's where I post.
All righty.
Hour 54.
Look for the bright orange shirt on Telegram. But anyway, I do want to get back to the interview with John. I appreciate his ministry so very much, and he's taking the time to spend time with us today. And I want, John, are you still there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, great. Just checking. Never know what can happen in a few minutes. If the call drops, I'm totally unaware of it until I go there and there's like nothing on the other end.
Sure. Dead air is not good on radio. I know.
Yeah, but I want to start the second hour with this here. I want to revisit something I mentioned in the first hour out of this New York Times article and this quote from one of the Hamas officials, and then I'll branch it out from there. But just to refocus for the moment, again, there was a series of interviews with the New York Times, and Hamas spokesman Khalil al-Hayya, who he's supposedly he's in the highest echelons of the leadership body of Hamas. He defended the group's surprise, multi-pronged October 7th attack. I'm basically reading this out of the New York Times at the moment. But he said this. He said, this is a quote, "We succeeded in putting the Palestinian issue back on the table, and now no one in the region is experiencing calm." And he said that, by the way, from his luxurious home in Qatar, but I won't get into that right now, because all these Palestinian leaders are living in the lap of luxury while they're sending all their useful idiots out there to commit, to commit atrocities and suicide bombings and all that. But that's another thing. But John, when I read this quote, "We succeeded in putting the Palestinian issue back on the table and no one in the region is experiencing calm," my mind immediately jumped to a passage in Psalm 126, where the writer of the Psalm, I don't know who wrote Psalm 126, it might have been David, it might have been the Sons of Korah, I'm not sure, I didn't annotate that, but the Psalm 120, verses 6 and 7 says, "My soul has dwelt too long with one who hates peace. I am for peace, but when they speak, they are for war. And I just was so reminded of that reading this quote from this Hamas leader. The verse before that verse in Psalm 120, verse 5, and this is where I want to branch out on this because it's very interesting. He says, the psalm writer writes, "Woe is me that I dwell in Meshech," which is Meshech is modern day Turkey on the northeastern area of Asia Minor. But he says, "Woe is me that I dwell in Meshech, and that I dwell among the tents of Kedar," which is Saudi Arabia. And as I ponder that verse, I'm thinking, man, that's called being stuck between a rock and a hard place. This poetic picture, the writer of this psalm is stuck between those to the north of him that are warmongers, those to the south of him that they're not usually on the best of terms either, which brings up an interesting thing where I'm going with this. And I think you know where I'm going with this. There's a lot of speculation, and I think it's very sound speculation, that one of the reasons that Hamas and Iran did this and timed it when they did was to interrupt and disrupt the approaching peace agreement or peace deal that Israel was about to embark with Saudi Arabia. And again, I'm just these verses in the Psalm is just exploding in my spirit. So, what do you think? Number one, what do you think of that hypothesis? Number one.
Well, I do think that Iran has actually come out and said, somebody in the Iranian leadership, maybe in the Revolutionary Guard Corps, has come out and said that this was done to disrupt what was going on between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And remember, it was September 20th, that Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Arabian crown prince, gave an interview to Bret Baier on Fox News.
Yes.
And you can go and you can find that on YouTube. And you should go listen to it. I mean, he speaks in English.
Oh, yeah. He's very articulate.
He did go to school in the UK. And I think, though, it was the first interview he's ever given where he spoke English. And he talked about the fact that this agreement that they're working on, and they were still working on it at that time, this was during the time of the UN General Assembly meetings in New York. And he said, look, people were saying that this is on hold. And he goes, no, that's not true. We're working on it. Now, some people have speculated that the deal's already been inked and signed. I'm not sure that that's true. And it's been put on hold because of what's going on. But I don't think it was going to happen. My personal opinion is the current king of Saudi Arabia, and understand that Arab tribal culture is very respective of elders. And so the king is very pro-Palestinian. It was he and his brothers, all of the kings of Saudi Arabia since the original King Saud, who died in 1953, have been sons of King Saud. So we've had 70 years of kings of Saudi Arabia that are the sons of the founding king, who ruled from, I think, 1931 or 32 until 1953. There's going to be I think that the new crown prince is reflective of a generational shift in how the Saudis view the Palestinians. And if you remember back, a good friend of the crown prince of Saudi Arabia is a guy named Jared Kushner.
Mm-hmm. And
Kushner, he's currently managing, maybe $3 billion of Iranian sovereign money and investing it, and has the permission to invest it in businesses in Israel, which is kind of interesting. And he was actually in Saudi Arabia last week or the week before, last week, for the Financial Investment Initiative Institute, their seventh meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave an interview. You can find it on Jared's Kushner's or Twitter account. And, he talked about getting back to the Abraham Peace Accords. And if you remember that part of what Kushner wanted to do in the Abraham Peace Accords was to kind of neutralize the Palestinian demands. Because, listen, the Palestinians have been offered a state many times. Hillary Clinton was talking on The View yesterday about that her husband, who she never named, by the way, her husband had offered a Palestinian state to Yasser Arafat.
Oh, yeah.
And when Ehud Barak was at Camp David, or Riverwide, whatever they were calling those agreements, those proposed agreements. And Arafat rejected it.
Yes.
And they rejected this many times.
Mm-hmm.
So the Saudis, through some channels, I think, sort of started floating an idea back in June of 2022 called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. It appeared in a major Saudi newspaper, Al Arabiya, and it also appeared on a weekend publication of the Wall Street Journal. And in fact, in their section C, which is they have kind of like a big article there, it was called the Jordan option, or the Jordanian option for peace in the Middle East. So this is reflective of the Crown Prince and what he thinks and what he wants to do. But because his father is still alive, even though many people say he's suffering from dementia, like, can you imagine having a country where the leader has dementia?
Oh, I can't imagine that at all.
No, I can't imagine.
No, not at all. Not at all.
In the modern world. And so until the father dies, I don't think you're going to see a major change. I think the agreement is still on track. Even though this war, they have to take this posture in the Arab and Muslim world. But remember, when the Houthis, which are Iranian-sponsored proxy in Yemen to the south of Saudi Arabia, they've been launching drones and ballistic missiles against Israel. Two things to say about that. One of the missiles was shot down by a missile defense battery in Saudi Arabia, which is kind of interesting that in the midst of all this rhetoric about Israel and how bad Israel is, Saudi Arabia shot down a missile. That's kind of significant. And the other thing that's kind of significant too is one of these ballistic missiles from the Houthis had reached space,
mm-hmm.
what they consider space, and Israel shot it down. And that's the first time
mm-hmm.
that that's happened in human history. So this is not over, and it's expanding. And I think that's a question about what's next: is how far it's going to expand. But remember, so Mohammed bin Salman gives his interview on September 20th, and then 2 days later, Benjamin Netanyahu stands in the well of the General Assembly and gives a speech, and he holds up a graphic, and he says, "We are on the verge of a new Middle East." Now, that didn't age very well. And listen, so if he's planning to allow this attack from Gaza, I don't think he would go and give that speech at the UN about a new Middle East. We do have a new Middle East, but it's not the one that the Crown Prince and Benjamin Netanyahu were talking about in September, just 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I
mean, not to beat that dead horse to death, but from what I've seen of Benjamin Netanyahu over the past, whatever it's been, 20, 25 years, I don't even
mm-hmm.
know, as long as I can remember. From what I've seen of him, know of him, believe of the man, I just cannot, I refuse to wrap my head around any idea that he allowed this purposefully and knowingly to happen. I just can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I tend to agree with you on that. And I would say that even people I talk to in Israel that I would put into the Bibi haters category don't believe that.
Yeah.
Even people that oppose him. Now, there are some. And look, there's a lot of things that happen in this world that we can't explain. I mean, do we remember when we were talking about Lahaina and Maui?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What happened to that? I mean, what's going on there? And that's still an issue. And so I don't know who all's behind this, what happened and that type of thing. But again, you got to give the enemy some credit for a masterfully planned operation and carrying it out in a manner that reveals their true evil, demonic, satanic nature. I mean, what was the atrocities that were done? Go. You can find the videos out there,
mm-hmm.
and I would recommend to people go look at them, because you need to know what these people are capable of, and you need to know that the FBI is now coming out and saying that we may face similar problems here in the United States. And so your title for this is very appropriate in light of what's just happened. Is you really do need to be situationally aware.
Mm-hmm.
I heard of a new restaurant, and there's an FBI report that you can find under a thing called, I don't know if I should say it. It's spelled UNIT 910. And there's a lot of information that's published out there by Ben Berglom and some other people on Twitter and that type of thing. You can find it very easily. But they did put out a list of cities that were going to be potential targets of terror attacks, and that included the one that I live. I'm living way in the far suburbs, but Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, other cities are potential terror targets. And we have, Andy, I'll remind you, I don't know if you ever heard this, but we have probably 150 Muslim Somalians in Columbus, 150,000.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought that was more. I thought that was more up towards Michigan area, Dearborn.
Well, Minneapolis has about double what we have. So we have the 120 to 150,000.
That's a lot.
And they've been coming here. And I was at downtown one day. In fact, I had just never had a gun or anything. And my wife, I said, Pam, I will follow your lead on this. And she came to me one day and said, it's time for us to get our concealed carry licenses. So we went out and bought guns, and we went to a class. I signed up for a class, and I had just signed up for the class. And I went over to a continuing legal education thing. I was working downtown at the time. It was actually in an office building that I used to work in for a while. And there was a guy there. It was a 62-degree day in September. And I took pictures of him. He was standing at the end of my car when I pulled into park on the street there. This is 1 block from the state capitol, major hotel and convention center, and then the office building I was going. And he's taking pictures of all the buildings going down the street. And he's built like an Ohio State linebacker, like 6'2", 6'3", 235 pounds, ripped muscular build, athletic, but 62. And he's got a short sleeve shirt on, but he has a full face balaclava covering his mouth. And the only thing you can see is his eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, now I was situationally aware enough to say something's not right. I took pictures. I called the police. They came over. They transferred everything up to Homeland Security. That was probably 2016, 2017 when that happened. And, of course, nothing happened since. But, I have friends now telling me in Jerusalem they see Arabs going around taking pictures of apartment buildings and other things. And this is within Israel proper. This isn't the West Bank. This is within Israel. So there's, a big concern about multi-fronts that Israel's going to be facing. So we have Gaza. We have with Hezbollah and the Iranian proxies in Syria and Lebanon in the north. But now you have the West Bank, and the West Bank is really in a state of, I don't want to overstate it. I think I probably need to confirm it with people, but my observation is that it's incredibly tense in the West Bank. That's biblical Judea, south of Jerusalem, and Samaria, north of Jerusalem. A lot of that area is controlled. There's sort of joint security control, complete Israeli security control, complete Palestinian security control. And in that one area, there are signs when you go into that area that Israeli citizens are not allowed to enter these areas. There's a sign warning you. You can be prosecuted and put in jail if you go in here because they don't want people to become hostages. So there's that front. There's some concern, a little bit of concern, not too much about Jordan. Jordan doesn't really have an effective military much anymore. But about 70, 75, 80% of the Jordanian population is Arabs, Palestinian Arabs, many of whom, by the way, are kept in refugee camps and have been since 1948.
Yep.
So stop with this thing that only Israel abuses the Arabs. In fact, Sunday in my thing, I played a picture a video that I'd taken and showed bombed out neighborhoods, villages,
Yeah, I saw that.
residential buildings. And I said, oh, look, isn't this horrible what Israel's doing to Gaza? And then I said, but wait a minute.
Yeah, it was well played.
This isn't Gaza. This is Damascus
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And where are the protests of people protesting the bombing of Yarmouk refugee camp by the Assad regime in Russia a number of years ago to ethnically cleanse it of Sunni Arabs and get them out of the country and to a place where there's somebody else's problem? That was a lot of what led to the big immigration of Muslims, Arabs into Europe back 2015 to 2017, a couple million at least.
Yeah, that's a whole
And
nother.
now they're
That's a whole.
embedded in these towns. And, Andy, I went to London 5 years ago. It was actually 5 years ago this week, I think we were in London. And it was around Thanksgiving. And, the joke was of the people that drove us into London from where we had done a conference was, okay, now it's time. We're in London, and it's time to play a game that we call Can You Spot a Real Englishman? And it's not, we stayed 4 blocks from Speaker's Corner and Marble Arch and Hyde Park. And I'm telling you, in our hotel, 50 channels on the cable, and 10 of them were Arabic language in London.
I've done multiple broadcasts over the last several years about the Islamic Hijra that has overtaken Europe, Britain, mainland Europe. Erdogan was admitting, purposely ceding between Germany's liberal immigration policies under Angela Merkel and between Erdogan purposely ceding. But you know that they have a doctrine called Hijra, of Islamic migration for the sake of Allah.
Correct.
So that's a whole nother aspect to this multi-layered onion. I need to say this, and I wanted to ask you what you thought about this. I have to admit that we're a little bit over a month into the war that began on October 7th. I have to say that it hasn't escalated and spun out of control as quickly as I had anticipated. Not that I wanted to, but my initial feelings were like, this thing is going to go berserk within days. Now it's
going to be World War III. That's what a lot of us were thinking.
And I still think it certainly has the potential of going that way. But it seems like there's a little bit of a, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a calm before the storm, maybe? A little bit of a lull? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's some indication from Iranian sources that Hamas may have gotten out ahead of the plan. There are some released documents that indicate that the plan was to attack this past Passover, which was also a Jewish holiday, because they figure people are going to be on holiday. There's not going to be, they're not going to staff things. So Hamas may have acted too quickly. Nasrallah supposedly was going to give this big major speech last week, and everybody was all at Twitter in a flutter about what's he going to say. And essentially he just said, well, all options are on the table, and we're going to do what we're going to do. Now, so they keep probing, and this is what they've been doing for years. But at some point, we know there's going to be a war in the North. I just don't, there's no way that this can be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree, for sure.
So whoever's in charge at the time is going to get blamed for it. And I remember a speech by the Israeli Air Force head about 5 or 6 years ago at the Herzliya conference. And he said, look, we had the Second Lebanon War in 2006. We now have potential of another war. And he just says, look, we're ready. And so this is 6 years ago. He said, when it took us 37 days to get to a place where we could do a ceasefire in 2006. We're going to do in 24 to 72 hours whatever we accomplish. We're going to exceed what we did in 2006 in 24 to 72 hours, and it will be shock and awe like you've never seen. So they're ready, and so Hezbollah is sort of, I I don't know. The Iranians, they're evil leadership and they're pragmatic at the same time. So I don't know if they have all their weapon systems in place. Israel keeps bombing their factories and that sort of thing. So maybe they're not quite ready. But the Iranians are great at using proxies. But Hezbollah, a lot of Palestinians are really upset with Nasrallah of Hezbollah because he didn't come out and declare war on Israel. He just said, well, we're considering war, and if you act what we consider badly, then we'll begin a war with you. So I'm sort of surprised that it hasn't escalated.
Yeah, I expected Hezbollah
part of the thing, though,
have jumped in by now.
Maybe to deplete Israel by the war in the south and then attack. That may be
and that's a possibility, which leads to another question. How long will the Biden administration feign their support for Israel? Because that's all they're doing. That's all they're doing is feigning support for Israel. Publicly, they're saying one thing, and behind the scenes is doing something else.
So listen, everybody said, well, Israel did this because they would have world support. They don't have world support. They don't even have the support of their major ally, the United States. It's just kind of a fake thing that the administration is doing at this point.
Exactly. One of the things, well, I know that you wanted to, you had mentioned that there's so many different roads we can go down. One thing I'll bring up, and then when we have time, we could talk a little bit about the AI situation, because I think that does play into this, and I know you mentioned it, and I saw a report this morning on Epoch News, or Epoch Times, whatever they call it, that I want to get to. But there's something here that I feel like we should address together, and because it's popping up all over the Christian, Facebook pages, the Christian group pages, the anti-Semitism. That it's only in the Christian circles. I'll have to say it's mainly a minority, from what I can tell, but an arrogant, heretical minority, if I could use that word. But they keep. You're seeing a lot of uptick in the fraudulent, thoroughly debunked time and time again, pushing forth of the protocols of Zion. I'm seeing Christian after Christian, pushing forth this. It's a fraudulent work. Narrative.
Yeah,
thank you.
Narrative. That's right.
And it's
Andy,
it's driving me crazy.
Troubling. And that thing, I think, has been debunked about 10 ways from Sunday, as
easy.
they say. But it's embedded in a lot of people in the Christian community. And so there's this anti-Israel thing, and I don't know if we have a break coming up or anything, but I think we can place this in the
Thanks for reminding me. Actually, we do.
Bible prophecy context, if we have time.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought, because you just reminded me. I'm getting into the conversation. I do have to take a station break. Come right back to what you were saying. Hold that thought. We'll be back in a minute. Fusion of Heart, Mind, and Soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM. WEGV 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak. WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Well, praise God, everybody. Going to continue with our conversation with John Howler. I just want to make one program note. Normally we just do the first hour in our pro-production videos that I post on YouTube and Rumble. However, this entire interview, the entire 2 hours, or really less because of the breaks, but this entire interview will be produced on one video that my video producer will, do her post-production work on it, and she's really good about getting it up as quick as she can. It'll probably be loaded up later tonight, and if she gets hung up on something technical, it'll be up by the morning. She's usually really, really good about that. So keep an eye out for it. The entire interview will be edited down without the breaks in it to be distributed. We want, the whole point of the the Rumble channel, the YouTube channel, the videos I upload. The whole point is it for it to be a resource for the body of Christ. And, I would just encourage you to do a couple of things. One, share them, listen to it, go back and listen to things that you might have missed. Please share them around. And also, both on Rumble and YouTube, hit the little thumbs up, the little like button, because the more activity the algorithms see, the more they show up in the news feeds and in the streams. And it's all about reaching people. It's all about, again, being a resource to equip the body of Christ. More than anything else, this broadcast, yes, it's supposed to be informational, hopefully inspirational as well, but I want it to be a resource to combat against the propaganda and the lies and the things that a lot of people, brothers and sisters in the Lord, not questioning their salvation, but they buy into a lot of lies, and we need to speak the truth in love against a lot of the propaganda and the lies that are out there. And one of those things that's a lie that's out there a lot, and me and John were talking about it before the break, and we're going to go back to, is this thing that's been out for whatever it's been since the 30s, early 30s, the protocols of Zion, that a lot of Christians are still referencing and using it as source material, and it has been debunked numerous times. It was debunked shortly after it came out. It was debunked by the New York Times in whatever it was, let me see, I got it right here. A New York Times article debunked it in it was the Times of London. The Times of London debunked the Protocols of Zion and exposed it as a forgery in 1921. And then a Swiss court ruled that it was a forgery in 1935, and yet it persists on the internet as a de facto fact, and it's not. It's completely fraudulent. So, John, I asked you to hold your thought, and I hope you did, to speak into these things. Are you there, John?
Sorry, I put you on mute there for a second. I wasn't hearing anything in my headphones anyway. So, look, let me make 3 points. So, look, I guess you would call me a Christian Zionist in the sense that I think that the Jewish people have a right to have a state in their ancient homeland. There's this thing out there where we need to return to the 67 borders, meaning the 1967 lines before the 1967 Six-Day War. And my contention is, well, maybe we do need to return to the 67 borders to solve this problem. But why don't we make it the 967 BC borders?
Sure.
And that would expand Israel quite a bit. And of course, that wouldn't be very popular either. But I think this, as we sort of talk as Christians among ourselves about this Israel thing, and I do think that I support it because I think God supports it. It's part of God's program.
Of course.
And I think we need to navigate and be careful that we can't turn the Jewish state of Israel political entity into an idol. Just like we shouldn't, turn America or leaders in America into idols.
Absolutely.
That we think do no wrong.
I agree.
Israel does things wrong, and I've been critical of some of the things that they did. For example, I think they should have taken out the nuclear facilities a long time ago, and that's kind of a sarcastic way of saying that I don't agree with them on everything. I don't think they're strong enough in many cases. And by the way, on this thing with Gaza, if they had heeded the warnings, okay, so let's say everybody did not stand down or was negligent or anything, what would they have done as a response? They would have done everything. They would have done exactly what they're doing right now. They would have gone in and obliterated the place if they had, a realistic assumption of what was coming. That's my opinion. And again, facts may not support that, and that's fine. I've been wrong before. But I think we have to be careful about not turning Zionism, a Zionist recognition that the Jewish people have a right to a state, into an idol. That's bad. But on the other side, what I'm troubled by is all these people out there, and I could make a very long list of people that I'm seeing now, some of whom I've known this for a long time, and now they're rabid about it. I mean, it's just, I listen to a lot of people I don't agree with, but I'm really having a hard time listening to any of these people now because they've completely discredited themselves. And so they use their theology in a very clever way to hide their rank Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. And that's very bad too. So we have to strike some kind of a balance in this thing. But the question is, and Andy, I don't see, as I study Bible prophecy and talk about it a lot and kind of relate it to current events, I frankly, I do not see how these end-time prophecies come about without a Jewish state of Israel in the land at the time. So that doesn't mean that Israel being reborn in 1948 is the ultimate fulfillment of prophecies like the dry bones and Ezekiel 37, and the regathering to the land, because those have additional steps that haven't been fulfilled yet.
Right.
I'll bring you back into the land in Ezekiel 35, not because you deserve it, but because my holy name is at stake. I made a covenant with you. I'm going to bring you back, even though you don't deserve it. And then when you're back, then I will give you a new heart, and then you will know that I am the Lord. We're not there yet. We're in the midst of this stuff unfolding in front of us. But another thing, and I've used this example recently, so in one of the critical prophecies of the end times is in Matthew 24, verse 15, where Jesus says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Now, that gives us a lot of information that Jesus believed. One, Daniel wrote Daniel. And number two, there is this abomination of desolation thing. And you've got to go to Daniel to figure what that is. And you have the holy place. And that can only happen in the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So if there's not a Jewish state, and they were out of the land for almost 2,000 years, how does this come about? Do you think a Muslim's going to build a holy place or have that as a holy place? They come in and they take it over and they say it's our holy place, even though Dr. Kadar and articles in Al Arabiya in the last couple of years will say that's a complete bogus claim that that's where Muhammad went. That's not the farthest mosque of Islam. Right. It's totally bogus, and I'm sure you've covered this in the past.
Oh, many times.
But what Jesus also goes on to say is, when you see that, then flee and pray that your flight not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. So this kind of came home to me when we were staying in Jerusalem for a couple of weeks in 2017. It was during the Trump visit we were there. And I'm on Shabbat, we're staying in a friend's place just one block from the old city. And on Shabbat, you can't get a bus in Jerusalem. So my point is that if Jesus is giving this prophecy, it doesn't really make sense unless there's a Jewish state in existence that's recognizing Shabbat in some form at the time that this abomination of desolation takes place. And you're not going to have that unless you have the Jews in control of the political structure and apparatus of Israel. I think it's sort of a hidden, embedded prophecy that, oh yeah, that's how that happens. You kind of have to work it backwards. And maybe it's because I'm a litigator or have been a litigator for 43 years that, we spend a lot of time in preparing a case where we work backwards on things to try to figure out how this came about or how did they get to this position. And so how do you get to this position without a Jewish state of Israel? That's what doesn't make sense. And it's even more important than that. So let me just read a little bit about Joel chapter 3. I mean, this is one of the critical prophecies of the end time. I want you to hear a couple names in here that are very important. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, the Kidron Valley there on between the Temple Mount and Mount of Olives. And I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage, Israel. What does that mean? I mean, trying to spiritualize this, I think, is really sort of cheering at the word of God and what it really means. And it says this, whom they have scattered among the nations, they have also divided up my land. They have cast lots for my people, have given a boy as a payment for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. Does this not sound like things that are going on in a certain religious culture in the world? Indeed, and then it says this, verse 4 of Joel 3, indeed, what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon? That's Lebanon. That's southern Lebanon. That's Hezbollah.
Mm-hmm.
And all the coast of Philistia. Wait a minute. What are the coasts of Philistia? It's Gaza. So understand that this geopolitical structure that's going to be in place, that there's prophecies, direct prophecies about.
Yes.
And we could go into Isaiah about the prophecy against Damascus. And a lot of people don't think that that's a prophecy yet. But it says Damascus will be a ruinous heap and cease from being a city.
The pictures you showed on Sunday already is
from being a city.
Yeah, no, I know that part of it. I was thinking of that verse when you showed those pictures on your prophecy update on Sunday. When you were showing those pictures of Damascus, I immediately thought of, there it is, right there, a ruinous heap.
Well,
I know there's more to that, but yeah.
I think it's the whole city, but they're on their way.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can look at the videos of these destruction that's taken place in the Syrian civil war, that started in 2011. Actually, we were in Israel in 2011. We were staying at a resort, not a real fancy one, a resort at the southern end of the Sea of Galilee, and I got up in the morning, it was March of 2011, and I looked at the newspaper, and they were talking about riots going on in the streets of a town called Dara in southern Syria, which was 30 miles away from where I'm sitting. So here I'm at this resort where it's peaceful and serene, and the glassy Sea of Galilee laying in front of me and everything. And literally, it's all breaking, everything's falling apart 30 miles away from me. And it still is. I mean, it's an interesting juxtaposition as, we see these things happening. So, we live fairly normal lives here in America.
Oh, yeah.
But that could be changed.
In a moment, in the flesh.
In a moment like that. And that's why your title today is appropriate.
John,
being situationally aware.
Let me bring this to your attention because I want you to address it. I could address it for you, but since it's addressed to you, I want you to address it. Somebody in the comment stream is saying John Haller is a futurist and has not considered historical fulfillment. Please address that.
Well, I think there's been historical fulfillment, but listen, don't tell me, this preterist thing. I'll admit I'm a futurist, okay?
Yeah, I am too. That's why I wanted you to answer it. I could have answered it, but it's addressed to you.
Listen, it says, Jesus says that there will be a time like no other time in human history, such as never was. And it also says that over in Jeremiah chapter 30, talking about the time of Jacob's trouble. So I think the point is that, there were bad things that happened in 70 AD. I get that, okay? But there have been much worse times since then.
I think
So I think that, and the other concept that we need to understand that very often in Jewish prophecy is that they have double fulfillment. There will be a fulfillment, but there may be a more specific fulfillment. Can I give you an example of that?
Absolutely.
So I love Hebron, and at Hebron there's the tomb of Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah, and there's a Herodian structure built on it that's been there for 2,000 years, been through earthquakes and everything. It's incredible what this guy built. And it's a pilgrimage site, and it's sacred to both Muslims and Jews. The Jews, by the way, the Muslims took it over and excluded the Jews from going into the religious part of the structure at the top for 700 years. That changed in 1967. But to a Jewish mind, as they look at Bible prophecy, they're not like we in the West. We're all very linear, and it has to be this way. We don't get the concept of double fulfillment, or that there's like a partial fulfillment, and then there's a really specific fulfillment. But when the Jewish rabbis look at Genesis, they look at that as it's sort of a midrash on all of the time of human history and the end times.
Mm-hmm.
And they will tell you that by the way, there's good news in all this. There is coming, this is what they believe, that there is coming a reconciliation between Jew and Arab, and that it may be centered around Hebron, there at the tomb of Machpelah. Why? Because when Isaac died, his two sons who were at odds, Esau, the father of the Arabs, the Edomites, and his son Jacob, the father of the Jews in Israel, they reconciled at the tomb of Machpelah. And they say that is a pattern for what will happen in the future. So I believe in fulfilled prophecy, my friend. Don't ever say that. There's much yet to be fulfilled. And I will be very blunt and honest. I think that saying that there's nothing to happen in the future except maybe the return of the Lord, I think is lazy in dealing with the text.
Yeah. As you laid
it's not very kind.
As you laid it all out, it is the understanding of partial fulfillments, dual fulfillments, patterns. Hebrew prophecy always goes in patterns, and we see that throughout near-term and long-term and final fulfillment. It's throughout the scriptures. It's in Isaiah 17 with the virgin birth. The sign was given to Ahab, and there's an immediate sign that was given to Ahab, but the final fulfillment, we understand, came at the birth of Jesus. You see in Jeremiah where Jeremiah says, Rachel weeping for her children because there are no more. He was literally watching. That wasn't just some prophetic, it was prophetic, but he wasn't just prophesying some future thing. He was witnessing that happening at that very moment when Nebuchadnezzar was carrying people, deporting the Jews back into Babylon. They were deporting them from this place in Benjamin, and he was saying that he was watching it. He was recording what was happening right then and there. Right. But that became a prophecy to be fulfilled, as we know, at the time when Herod killed the innocent. So again, we see this pattern throughout the scriptures. Yeah, I find preterism, especially full preterism. I don't know who this person is on the stream. I'm guessing by the comments that they have preterist leanings. Full preterism is absolute heresy, because there's a lot of things they deny, like the future resurrection and a whole bunch of stuff I won't go into right now.
Right.
But even partial preterism leaves you with a lot of conundrums. Like they put everything on 70 AD, like you said. Actually, when you look at the historical record, I would actually say a full fulfillment came in 135 AD under Hadrian.
That's correct.
When Simon Bar Kokhba was considered the Messiah by the Rabbi Akiba. I mean, Jesus said, "I have come in my own name, but another will come in his name, and you'll accept him." And that is literally what happened in 135. They never talk about 135. Yes,
right. And by the way, that's an interesting point, because it's difficult sometimes to find out. Not every prophecy has a double fulfillment. So the question about the prophecy there in John 8:35 or 5:30, I can't remember the reference, about another will come in his name, and he you will accept. Some people take that and apply that to the future Antichrist, and I don't know that that's correct. I don't agree with that.
It's not.
Certainly, we know that it applied to Bar Kokhba at the time that Jesus said it. It didn't have anything to do with 70 AD. And the problem I have with some of the 70 AD thing and the fulfillment is it almost canonizes the works of Josephus, who may have been, let's be honest, he was an historian, but he also worked for the Romans. So he made a bit of a propagandist. So we have to consider that. So I have trouble with too much reference being made to what I consider to be extra-biblical text to justify your position. And listen, show me how the abomination of desolation took place, as Daniel spoke about.
It didn't.
That Jesus referenced. That didn't happen in 70 AD. I'm sorry. It just did not happen. that was significant. That was a prophetic,
and it still is.
Prophetic event, the destruction of the temple.
Yeah. I don't want to.
Jesus talked about what appears to be a future temple or some kind of holy place there. And listen, so ignore futurism, but they're back in the land.
Right.
They've been gathered in many respects from all nations. And by the way, they're coming back is in the order that Isaiah talked about. And the geopolitical things that are going on in the world today. And I really get irritated when I see all these posts on Twitter and Facebook and, oh, you futurists and everything, you're causing Armageddon. I don't have an army or anything. I'm not causing anything. I'm just reporting on what's going on, what I think the Bible clearly teaches, and what you see going on in the world in a cultural decline. Can I give you an example? We don't really have time to talk about AI. We can do that on a future program.
I was just looking at the clock. I apologize for that, but address this.
That's okay. That's on me.
Yeah.
But listen, so in Ohio, so I live in Delaware County, Ohio, which I think went for Trump 53% in 2020. And in the prior election, I think it might have been 60%. And it's changed over time. And I can tell you, in my local school district, I don't have children or grandchildren. My wife, as she always says, she's not done raising me yet. So she's going on 49 years on that. And I'm like, I hope you get done soon. But we voted on an amendment to our state constitution the other day, last week, Tuesday. It was 2 days ago. I'm sorry. It was 2 days ago, that will essentially allow unrestricted access to reproductive services, which means unrestricted access to abortion. And many people are concerned with the rather broad language that it will allow minors in school districts and stuff to allow minors to go through transgender changes, transitions and that type of thing without parental involvement. That remains to be seen, but I think it's clear that, as a lawyer, I will tell you that it's broadly worded enough that it's clear that there are courts that are going to allow that. In my county, what ostensibly has been a bellwether conservative county in elections for a number of decades, that passed with, I think it was 61 or 63% approved of that amendment to the state constitution. And I can tell you, driving around, vote no on issue 1. I saw a lot of vote no on issue 1 signs compared to vote yes on issue 1 signs. And I'm telling you, to me, that's a bellwether for the country, for our culture.
Yeah.
And I think in Virginia, the legislature flipped on that issue alone. So, look, it's not a winning issue for the Republicans. So, whether you like Trump or not, I think he's a politician. I mean, he is a very deaf politician. And he came out a couple months ago and said, yeah, we need to work this heartbeat thing and this abortion thing. And I think he was recognizing this is not a winning issue for the Republicans in 2024.
You got to differentiate between the political realities as well as the personal idealism, if I could put it in that term.
Correct.
I'm down to
he's a politician. He's pragmatic, and that's what he said.
Yeah, I'm down to the last few seconds here. So let me just wrap it up and say I appreciate your ministry so very much. I really do. I watch almost all, if not all, your Sunday shows for sure. Once in a while I catch a midweek one if I have the time. I'm pretty busy during the week. But once again, folks, you can follow John Haller on Facebook as well as YouTube, Rumble, and all those other places he mentioned a moment ago. But John, thank you for calling in. I am literally out of time. I'll be in touch with you. In the meantime, folks, keep it right here on Faith FM. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, and let all that you do be done in love. Thanks for calling in, John. God bless.
God bless. Thank you, Andy.